Thank you for joining us at a live journalism event for a session about live journalism events. It's going to get very meta in here right now. I'm Mary Welter Brown. I'm the founder and CEO of the News Revenue Hub. We help news organizations build member campaigns, member programs, advertising and event programs, really all of the revenue strategies necessary to be a sustainable news organization. And we really do believe that events should play a really critical role in helping news organizations connect with their communities. And that strengthens both their editorial strategies, because you're talking to real people and seeing how your journalism is actually resonating in person, but it also helps their business objectives. So that's why we're here today. And I've had the pleasure of knowing our two panelists for many years, and they've both done this so effectively. So please meet Natalia Antelava, the founder and CEO of the international newsroom Coda Story, and the co-founder of the Zeg Storytelling Festival in Tbilisi, Georgia, the country. And Evan Smith, co-founder of the Texas Tribune, former CEO of the Texas Tribune, now a senior advisor at the Emerson Collective, and the founder of the Texas Tribune Festival in Austin, Texas. And I believe there's more on your bio, but we don't have enough time really to go into it. So in addition to launching and sustaining two award-winning digital news organizations, and as we know, that in and of itself is a feat in today's economy, they've both created two signature events that over time have really grown into their own brands and their own standalone products. I wanted this audience in Perugia, I've been here for several years, because I know how much you appreciate live events, to have the experience of understanding how they developed their events and how it's been so intrinsically woven into their business models. I really wish, honestly, that I could take you all to Tbilisi, transport you there right now, and to Austin, Texas, so you can experience these events in person, because you have to experience things like this to really understand how special they are. But I think we all just got to Perugia, and we're pretty happy with the setting that we're in right now. So let's stay, and we'll have to settle for some event marketing videos that will set the stage for the conversation, so you can get a little taste of the Zeg Storytelling Festival last year and the Texas Tribune Fest. So let's roll the videos.
Very special word in Georgian, and it means a day after tomorrow.
So many people have stories to tell that really matter. Now more than ever, it's what we as writers do, and storytellers and journalists, and truth is under attack, freedom is under attack, and it's our obligation and duty to portray it as accurately as possible.
I've been to many festivals around the world, and people here are exceptionally friendly, welcoming, and I think the spirit of the people and the city is really embodied in this festival.
Please welcome to the stage Natalia Antelava. I think the conference is making people feel as welcome as this country does to people, which is incredible.
1, 2, 3, say!
So you have this incredible combination of some of the most serious, critical work being done in the world right now. And then you'll have some lighthearted storytelling as well. And that breadth of the concept of storytelling is not something that I've seen at other conferences.
So it's actually amazing to be here and to hear right from their mouths what's going on in the world, and to have these conversations that I want to have so badly, but talking to other actors about these things isn't always as fruitful as it is with journalists.
Very, very honored to be here, because what I have found out and what I've seen is that this is going to be a major, major world conference every year. It'd be very hard for somebody who gets to know about this festival to go to Google Camp, but not also show up at Zeg. So.
All right. Thank you, Sean. Sean Penn, everybody, give him a hand. Thank you, Zeg. It's been wonderful. Thank you.
Put your seats in an upright position.
So that gives you a taste, right, of the flavor. We're going to start with Natalia. Take us back to 2019. You were running Coda Story from Tbilisi. Things were going well. You were in your lane. You were in your groove. What motivated you to create a storytelling festival?
You'll be shocked. Does this work?
Yeah, there you go.
So you'll be shocked to hear that the idea for Zeg was born in a bar. We were, having drinks one night with at the time, people we were renting our co-working space from. And we thought, wouldn't it be fun to do a project together? And I was looking for ways of diversifying Coda's revenues, because Coda was very reliant on foundation funding, and we were trying to figure out how we can make money in other ways. It was 2019, and Georgia suddenly was on a bit of a map. People were coming from Berlin to go clubbing in Tbilisi. New York Times was listing it as one of the top destinations for whatever the year. So we thought, maybe we can build on the momentum. What I wasn't interested in doing was really creating a journalism conference. And I was very lucky to have co-founders who were not journalists at all. So we came up, and Coda has always had this real focus on storytelling and creating engaging stories that really bring people in, because I think a lot of really excellent journalism gets wasted by bad storytelling. So we thought, okay, we'll just make it a storytelling festival, and we will use it to bring people from across different industries and different professions, and always can do with getting out of our silos, and it will be a more fun conversation. And it literally just happened like that. And we found, actually funny enough, at our Columbia University fellow who came at the time. We had a fellowship with Columbia University, and she just arrived fresh off the plane, and it was very impressive how, she was the one who came up with a Georgian word to name it. It means day after tomorrow in Georgia. And she said, we should just call it Zeg. So it was all a bit sort of, let's do this. And then somehow we did it, and it worked. And I think the people came. You were there for that first year. And then suddenly, what started as a way of bringing in money became a way of I remember for the first time, because I had hardly been to conferences, let alone organized one. And I remember putting the program together and thinking like, oh, this is really fun. And it's such an editorial process, right? It's this whole process of curation and figuring out like what fits where and so on is like, it is like doing journalism. Yeah, and it became a very powerful kind of way of convening people. There was a little wrinkle in our whole plan because that was 2019. And you might remember what happened in 2020. But then we came back in 2022 with a smaller event and a big one last year, and there will be another one this year if Georgia holds out and doesn't get invaded by Russia then. Yeah, and so that's how it all...
And you found, as you saw, there was a lot of heavy hitters there, right? Celebrities. Talk about the formula that you've determined.
Yeah, I'm going to give away all my secrets. I have two. Heaven knows how it really works. So I have a selection speaker criteria, which really is, would I want to have dinner with this person? And I have my business model triangle, which is audiences come for the celebrities, celebrities come for war reporters and cool journalists who tell cool stories, and journalists come for the free booze. And, you know.
That's a business model.
Seems to work.
So Evan, you heard Natalia started out looking for a revenue driver.
Right.
For those of you who do not know Evan Smith, he is legendary at being a fundraiser. He accidentally raises money when he's just walking to the bathroom. So is it safe to assume that you were setting out to raise money when you created TripFest?
I actually was not. Let me say, first of all, how happy I am to be here. First time in Perugia. So amazing to see a full room of people. I want to come to Zeg.
Yes.
After seeing that video, it was amazing. I'll also say, if you saw our video, there were absolutely people there I did not want to have dinner with. I could think of one in particular. And the reality is that when we started the Tribune Festival, it was, Mary, not about revenue. It became about revenue, which I'll get to in a second, but ultimately it was about journalism. Every good journalism organization can be and should be a convener at heart. What we do is bring people together and hopefully get them into conversations with people not only they agree with, but people they disagree with. Putting people in a room, especially today, with people who you don't have much in common with and probably don't see the world the same way as, is the most important thing that we can do as journalists. In our country, at least, the lack of that, the opportunity on a regular basis to talk to people you don't think like and don't agree with, that is the poison coursing through the veins of our democracy, and I'm convinced that events like this are the antidote to the poison. I believe that putting people in a room for an event like yours or ours is truly making things better to the degree that they can be made better. I wanted this event to be about journalism. I watched with envy, jealousy was the motivator. I watched with envy the New Yorker magazine and the Atlantic, two publications I greatly respect, start festivals. And I was running a magazine at the time in 2008 called Texas Monthly and thought we can have a festival in Austin. There can be a Texas Monthly festival the way there was an Atlantic festival and a New Yorker festival. The economy did not cooperate. And so we had to shelve our plans to do that, but by the time the economy came back, I made the decision to go start the Tribune with some other folks and walk the idea across the street. We came in the door on the first day with the idea. And the idea would be, we're covering politics and policy. There are plenty of conversations to be had within the realm of politics and policy that people would want to be witness to in the room while they're going on. Question was how to get this thing off the ground. We started small in 2011. We took about a year and a half, call it almost 2 years, before we put the first festival on. It was one day. We invited everybody we could think of from all political stripes, all over Texas, some people from around the country. But the thought was, real time is a platform. Live journalism is a platform no different from any other. You distribute your content across that platform. The work that we were curating for the first program and all the programs since, this year will be the 14th, we see as journalism, absolutely journalism. It is intended to make news, break news, illuminate the challenges and opportunities in the world. It has great benefits for the business. It's lead gen for membership. It's lead gen for sponsorship. It's lead gen for audience. It creates an opportunity for more people to be aware of the work you're doing, and the visibility of the brand goes up as a result of that. But fundamentally, it was about content and it was about journalism. Now, over time, as the thing grew, kind of the inverse story, it became about revenue. Last year, 2023, we had more than 300 people speak over 3 days. We had 100+ hour-long sessions. We had 9,000 people registered to attend. We did $3 million in gross revenue that weekend against $1.5 million in expense. I went into journalism not to do math, but I think that's good. Yeah. To double your expense in the form of revenue to create that profit margin, which all goes back to pay for journalism, which to me means to pay for journalists, is a win. And so I view the success of this event as something that I am running around the country, our country, sermonizing and evangelizing about as a way forward alongside the many other revenue streams that exist. I believe the content you create will be absolutely important for you, important for your audience, important for the world, but just as important is the ability to pay for news with integrity, the right way and not the wrong way, to fund journalism, which is what we all need to be thinking about.
Yeah. I want to double click on events as a platform. You talk about cutting through the noise a lot. How do we strategically design events that are meant to cut through the noise and create conversation in a way that social media or the other platforms cannot, or will not, or do not? Natalia.
Couldn't agree more with Evan. I think it is a platform, and it is a platform at the time when we desperately need better distribution platforms for our journalism, because we cannot keep relying on social media or big tech companies that have their business model that works for them. The traffic and clicks and shares, we adopted them as our models, and they clearly do not work. So I think that element of the whole live events journalism combination is really, really important. We need to, and there is no better way of building a relationship with your audience than being in the same physical space with them. I mean, you can walk down the street of Perugia and there will be queues. There are lines of people wanting to get into the rooms. There is clearly a demand for that, because I think in these rooms people get something that they cannot get online. I think everyone becomes a little bit more tolerable and a little bit more reasonable and just a tiny bit more human when we see them in person. So yeah, for me it also addresses, in addition to addressing the revenue and creating kind of a new life for the journalism that you produce, it also addresses this very existential question of how do we get the stories that matter to our audiences.
Yeah. Why were you so determined to be cross-disciplinary at Zeg?
Because I think groupthink is a problem for humanity in general, and I think our industry is not immune to groupthink, and I think we get locked into our silos, and the information infrastructure of the world we live in really promotes the silos, and I think more effort we put into bringing different perspectives together, and it can be bringing in polarizing views or simply bringing together perspectives that you normally, curating perspectives that you normally don't see in the same sort of space. And for me, a way of doing it was making sure that we are geographically diverse and we are professionally diverse as well. And I think it works because there were a lot of people who came to the festival to see Sean Penn, but they stayed for everything else, right? Mm-hmm. And it's kind of, in that sense, it's almost like a print magazine or a newspaper where you buy it for the weather or for the sports scores, but you actually, you know, it gives you that element of discovery that you otherwise don't get.
Yeah.
And you can't get it online.
I love the way you just described that. I mean, you know, Hillary Clinton and Liz Cheney were our Wordle, basically.
Right.
Right? They came for the Wordle, they stayed for the news. Well, I agree with you. It's 100% the case that you program festivals with the intention of bringing people in the door, but then the rest of the program has to keep them in the door. Two things to the question that you asked and to your answer I thought were both very smart topics. One is that, you know, social media is the province of anonymous assholes. Live events, it's a little bit harder to be an anonymous asshole. And I think we have to deal with the anonymous asshole problem all the time.
Yeah.
And I think that live events is an antidote of a sort to that as well. In the room is just different. The other thing I'd say from a kind of good stewardship of your audience and understanding the contribution you're making to democracy standpoint, we do not have competitive elections in my home state of Texas. That's the design play being run here. It's not an accident. As a consequence of that, people who run for office often don't have to interact with their constituents ever. As long as they have the right letter next to their name, R or D, they get reelected. Forcing them to be in the room with the people who they represent at the Capitol in Austin or the Capitol in Washington, or represent all of us in the United States, forcing them to be in that room and to be held accountable with cameras rolling and the people they represent in the audience in real time is a value, right? That is something that we don't get otherwise. So when we talk about live journalism as a platform, we certainly mean it in terms of distribution, but we also mean it as another weapon in the arsenal to hold these people who need to be held accountable, because if we don't do it, then they won't change their behavior. And when we hold them accountable, time has shown that they will change their behavior. And so I think actually the value of that as a platform is getting them in a room with the people they represent means they have to sit up straight, they have to straighten their ties, they have to do right. And I love the fact that we get to be a part of that exercise.
And can I just jump in and add something? I think another thing that really matters is the location and where it takes place. I think it makes a huge difference that your festival's in Texas, right? The fact, you know, I don't know Hollywood actors, or I write a lot of cold emails. We basically write a lot of cold emails. And we try to sell the fact that, you know, if you care about, I don't know, the war in Ukraine, like this is another front line of this war, you need to come here to understand it. And I think like bringing people, turning it into a little bit of a destination and bringing these people who will then go off and, you know, kind of like helping them shape their own narratives and their own minds. Really
venue absolutely matters. It has to be someplace people want to go, because you're asking people to take time to come to your thing. Your thing has to be in a place people want to be. You know, we have very large cities in the state of Texas. Dallas and Houston are among the largest cities in the country. If we had done this festival in Dallas or Houston, nobody would have come. Yeah. No one would have been there as a speaker, and people would not have attended because those places are boring.
Yeah.
Austin is Austin. People want to come to Austin, so doing it there means that's an additional element in the pitch. And I agree with you. I mean, when you ask people to come, you are in some respects sending a missive over the wall, not knowing whether anyone's going to see it. I'm amazed at what you've accomplished in such a short time. I couldn't have gotten Sean Penn in year 3 or whatever, you know. But the thing is, once you develop a reputation, if you run an event that is put on smartly and successfully, if it runs well, if the other people around the people you're inviting on the program are people who they think, oh, that person's kind of like me, that's cool that they're there and I'm there. Yeah. If you deliver an audience year after year, if you give them the venue that they want and the platform that they want, then it actually does become a lot easier to get people to say yes. And you chase after them sometimes, as you know, for a while before they say yes, but it's a marathon and not a sprint.
Yeah. Let's talk about the nuts and bolts. I mean, you both were CEOs of these companies, and you spend a great deal of your time working on this event. How do you prioritize that with everything else that you have to do? And, you know, if we're agreeing here that events should be a bigger part, if it is another platform, another distribution mechanism for newsrooms, should we be rethinking how newsrooms are structured so that they're capable of producing these kinds of events? What have you learned? What advice do you have?
Do you want to go first?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, a lot of the, one thing we haven't accomplished is $3 million in revenue. That's still...
Sean Penn,
hopefully.
$3 million.
Yeah,
it's not bad.
I think I might take $3 million. I wish Sean Penn.
It's not bad.
Don't tell, is this being live streamed? Don't tell Sean
Don't
Penn.
tell him.
But I think what it has been for us, and it's so interesting that, the origin story is so different. You started it as, for journalists, I started it for revenue, but I think for both of us, it became a passion project. I just really believe in it. It's actually really fun organizing it, and it doesn't feel like work. So, I think that's a really big part of it, because and it partially doesn't feel like work because I think what makes journalism often very difficult is that we're putting these incredibly important stories out there into that space, and we don't know what happens to them. And we put so much work, and of course gain the trust of people, our sources and people we talk to, and then they just go, and you kind of you can't really, it's hard to measure the impact of it. Sometimes it isn't, but you kind of don't know what that individual story really is done for a lot of it. This is something that's very tangible because you see the faces of people who come, and it's also really nice at the time when so much of the news is so depressing and we have so many reasons to be depressed about the state of the world. It's really nice to still create a meaningful, delightful experience that doesn't shy away from the big questions or problems, but still gives people some sort of almost like a little meaning.
Yeah.
I did not answer your question,
No,
did I?
and I noticed that. Evan, we'll come back to you, Natalia.
Yeah, I live in Texas. We haven't gotten to anything other than depressing yet. It's only 14 years. Maybe we'll get to optimistic one day. No, look, I mean, the reality is that, for a whole bunch of reasons, I agree with what you said. Look, I think there are a couple ways at this. I want to say that I think the most important job that we have in an event like this is to give people an additional place to consider the things that affect their lives, right? Like, I'm very focused on the audience. That's really the thing that is most concerning, not in a negative way. It's most concerning in the sense that that's where my focus is. I, like you, love this work. If the old cliche is if you love it, it isn't work, or it doesn't feel like work. And I think in the case especially of the festival, of the Tribune in general, but of the festival in particular, it never felt for a day to me like work. It was something I loved to do, and I naturally did it at all times. Look, before this session was happening, I was upstairs checking email and found that an author I respect at a news organization I respect has a book out in September about the power of sheriffs in American counties, in the counties of American states. And I wrote her a message immediately and said, we have to get you and your book to our festival. Like, I do not stop. I never stop. And that's okay. The jobs of the CEOs of a lot of these organizations is to have no off switch. I said for all the years I ran the Texas Tribune that I was like Indiana Jones outrunning the boulder. As you know, if you stop, the boulder gets you. I was convinced that the boulder was never going to get me. And so I've always approached the work on this event as one where I worked on it 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. Not to say that you have to do that and that's what it takes, but it helps if you have that focus and if you have that willingness to throw everything into it. I, after many years of running both the Tribune and running a big magazine, 31 years running things in Texas effectively, I knew a lot of people, and having those relationships does matter. If you're trying to invite people to speak, knowing that you can text somebody because you have that kind of a relationship, or send them a direct message on social media, or send them an email, or pick up the phone and call them in an old-fashioned sense, those things ultimately make the job better. But it's all effort that you have to undertake, and you have to be willing going into it to do it. And you're going to end up, as I'm sure is the case at Zeg, you're going to end up asking many, many more people to participate in your event every year than will actually participate in it. You're going to get a lot of no's. You'd rather take yeses, you're prepared to take no's. That's got to be the attitude here. And again, you ask and ask and ask until they eventually come. Hillary Clinton came to the festival 2 years ago after my asking her probably every year for 5 or 6 or 7 years. You hope you're going to get her to say yes one day. You may never, but you have to keep asking. And that's just it's just understanding the cadence of this is kind of just constant.
So it's clear you're both passionate about it. How did you get your teams passionate about it?
This, let me jump in here and say that I think that you ask a really important question about the culture and the organization of your staff at one of these, and it is a conundrum that I was not able to solve after 13 or 14 years. Events is very hard work, from the very first to the very last, and it tends to break people on your staff, the amount of work that's required. And everyone, I mean, I'm not going to speak for you. I suspect this is the case. I know in our case that our event was always under-resourced in terms of human resources and financial resources. Not to say that that expense line did not account for needing to augment the staff. It did. But it's never enough because these events are very, very difficult to put on. There's a certain amount of expertise that you have to access either on your staff or more likely off your staff to run the production, to do the back end. You as a journalist may have a sense of what the program should be, but you need help putting on the event. And while most of us are good at being journalists, most of us are not very good at producing events.
But you have an events team.
We have a small events team, an events team of 3, but we have a standard vendor we've used out of house who's our partner who produces the back end of the festival. Actually, the people who ran South by Southwest started out as our vendor for the first 7 years, and then we kind of outgrew one another in terms of what they wanted and we wanted out of the relationship. We moved on to somebody else, and the somebody else has turned out to be just a godsend, somebody I would, trust with my life, and has done a magnificent job at running this event every year.
So it's part staff.
But you have to bring out-of-house help in because no one has enough staff or enough expertise in-house. Is that also the case with you?
Yeah, it is the case, and I mean, maybe something that I will say may be helpful if any of you in the room are thinking of doing it. What has really helped us, we have a little bit of a division between the editorial and the business and the production side of it that is almost natural because we had partners from the start. We didn't have a vendor, we did it ourselves, but it was based mostly my partners who kind of look after the logistics, and it's a very collaborative process, and I really appreciate their input because they are, I lived outside of the country. I went back to Georgia to bootstrap Coda into existence, but I had lived outside of the country, so I was pretty detached from the way that things were working and what people were interested in. And I think one of the reasons why we managed to create something that really resonates is because my co-founders at Zeg are not journalists, and they have but they're very smart people who care about, everything that's going on, and they have just a slightly different sensitivity, which makes me think harder when I'm programming, when our editorial team is programming and putting the program together. So we never used a vendor. I mean, people have now come to us asking us to help them organize events. So I don't know where that will take us, but that combination, like finding the right partner, and you have to be, because things come up. Like, for example, right now, we are under a lot of pressure from the government to take their money. We don't take their money, and they want us to take their money. They call us and say, how much would you like? We have an unlimited budget. And
don't take their money.
No, obviously we're not going to take that money, right. But you have to be in it with partners who are very aligned with you in terms of the meeting. But I think it is possible to do it with outside of newsroom help.
There is one more point I'd make on this, and I think this gets to this question of whether the experience that you've heard about at Zeg or at the Tribune Festival matters to anybody if you don't have an organization the size of yours or of mine. I don't think these have to all be the same.
That's right.
There is no one size fits all anywhere within the news business, right? What is the liturgy? If you've seen one news organization, you've seen one news organization, right? They're vastly different. Every community is different. Every organization is different. In that way, if you do live events or you do a signature live event like the ones we're talking about today, you will do your event. It will be, by definition, different from the events you're seeing up here because it will be yours. which means it will be scaled up, down, or sideways based on the thing that you identified in your community you can do and should do. If your staff is not up to it, if your organization is not so big, if your community wants something different, that's okay, because you will create something that is appropriate for your thing. What is not okay is deciding, in my opinion, on the front end, I can't do this, I'm not going to try. We're in a we have to try moment in journalism.
Yeah. And it doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to be a festival. It doesn't have to be a conference. It can be a dinner party, a salon. I think what people are hungry for is a conversation. That people want to be getting out of these shouting matches that are happening online are exhausting and are not taking us anywhere good. Right. And people know that, and they want to. So I think it's very possible to identify something that your audience wants. What is it that they want to talk about, and identifying the formats in which it's feasible for you and your resources to do it, and then doing it.
Good.
One more question, then we're going to open it up. So if you have questions, please put your hand up, and we'll get right to you. Selective news avoidance is a huge issue. How can events play a role in sort of helping people have another platform to have these conversations? And how do you appeal to the people who have simply said, I've had too much of this? How can we get those people back into the fold potentially through events?
I think by creating experiences and bringing something outside. I think by recreating a little bit of the magazine or a newspaper effect that I mentioned earlier.
Can news be fun?
I think journalism can be fun.
Look, my answer to the question is make what you do indispensable, and people will be unable to avoid it. The reality is that news that is not indispensable, it's easy to avoid. But news that you need and must read because it tells you about the ways in which the world is impacting you in your daily life, right? Like that is such a fundamental piece of what we do. We make the connection between the decisions made by people in power and all of our daily lives. And when we stop doing that, people check out. But when we do that, people pay attention. And I think our events in the same way have got to be programmed in terms of both the people on stage and the topics being discussed so that they are indispensable or as close to it as possible for the audience. Audience must be there because they don't want to miss this discussion of a thing that is directly impacting their lives. When we program, our general rule at the Tribune Festival is all entrees, no side dishes, right? Like we don't have time for side dishes. Everything has to be maximum impact. Always swing for the fences, always, always, always. And so that's the way that you ensure that you keep that connection to the audience.
Great, thank you. Questions?
Hello, thanks. This is really, inspiring, and also maybe news can't be fun, but this session has been fun, so well done. I'm really interested in the conflict or like the intersection between like this social purpose and the revenue side of things, because if we're saying we want to get people from different walks of life in a room together, convene people that would never normally speak, who would never normally have the chance to, cross paths, there's going to presumably be a lot of poorer communities in Texas, marginalized communities, maybe they don't speak English, they certainly can't afford a ticket to, I don't know how much the tickets are. What are you doing about accessibility? And I guess not just in pricing, but, in terms of thinking about programming these events, to avoid it just being, I get you can have people from very different political viewpoints, but it still could be a quite similar kind of political or that sort of strata of society, like the kind of people that would be interested in these events coming to them. So how do you account for that?
I think it's an excellent question. Here's what you need to know about Texas right now. We have just passed an inflection point in our population. We're now 60% people of color for the first time in the history of the state. That population will never go below 60%. 95% of the population growth over a 10-year period is in communities of color. We're adding 11 Hispanic residents of Texas for every one white resident, right? This change is or should infuse, it is infusing or should infuse every decision that all of us in the news business are making about the content we create, the staffs we build, the leadership teams we put in place, and the events that we program. We have got to be intentional about understanding who the audience is, literally and existentially. And so we make certain that there is content that reflects what you said exactly, that there are many different kinds of communities. It's not just about an ideological divide, but it's almost about a socioeconomic and cultural divide as much or more. Now, in terms of the revenue piece, I don't believe that it's either or, I believe it's both and. You can have a social purpose and make money. One of the problems that we have in this business is that we have allowed ourselves to believe that we have to choose, and we don't. You can do both. We can do both. And you know, the fact is that the big corporate supporters of an event like ours will come in knowing that the people they're reaching aren't necessarily the people who will ultimately become their customers. We have a lot of people in our, audience every year, to your question about ticket pricing, who we just comp. And we say we try to make the ticket prices as affordable as possible at all socioeconomic levels. We make college students' ticket prices very affordable, if not underwritten so that they're free. We recognize that there are people who can't pay, and we never turn anybody away.
You also have Open Congress, right?
And we have an entire day that is free content in addition to the ticketed content, exactly, that is the last effort that we make, but by no means the only effort, to make certain that everybody is welcome.
Jonathan?
Hello. First of all, congratulations for your experiences, really inspiring. So, looking inside the recipes of your events, what's the quantity of journalism you have put inside? 50%, 90%? Because, of course, we have seen so many things which are really similar or not so fair, like food or entertainment. But the quantity of journalism, how much? Thank you.
100%.
Okay.
To me, it's 100%. I mean, we make sure, again, for the, because we are very intentional about bringing a range of perspectives to the festival, we try very hard to make sure that it's not just journalists, because then it would be just journalists, and that's not the point at all. But we do, but everything that happens on stage is a form of journalism, for sure. So it's all journalism. There is, we do live journalism, like shows, as part of the experience where it is actually journalists presenting their stories live on stage. But I think a conversation with a pianist about how his music fits into, what he believes about the world is also journalism. So I would say all of that. And just similarly, quickly addressing, so we don't do the Congress thing, that's a really good idea, but we do make sure that we bring in students, journalists come for free, and a bunch, sort of reach out to audiences that we think should be there. So we call it Open Congress because the street in front of the state capitol in Austin is called Congress Avenue, and we close it for 4 blocks and put up tents, and that's free content, and so we call it Open Congress. Not for one day has our journalism been less than 100%. Not one day. I will not equate that with you liking 100% of what we do. Yeah. In fact, we would be doing a bad job if everything we gave you, you liked. We live in the United States a confirmation bias. This is the thing we're solving for. I don't want you only to see things you like or that make you happy or make you feel comfortable. That is not the job of journalism. So while the journalism is 100%, what else is 100% is our guarantee to you that you're going to hate some things that are on stage. Well, the good news is there are other things for you to go see. But we try to provide an experience that will make at least some people happy at all times.
Hello, I have a question for both of you. How are you financing the events? We also have an event which we do in Romania, where I'm from, and it's very hard to obtain financing, especially for journalism or for events related to journalism. And you reached 3 million revenue, so I know America is different, but I just wanted to know, how do you finance these events?
Right, $1.5 million in sponsorship of the festival, plus or minus last year. About $400,000 in sales of tickets all in, plus or minus last year. We do an evening event during the festival that is a straightforward fundraiser for nonprofit journalism, an ungala, but effectively it's a gala, right? We do between $700,000 and $1 million in ticket sales. The balance is membership generated during that weekend for the organization. That's how you get to $3 million.
So I'm not going to name any numbers because that will be humiliating for me. But primarily sponsorship and tickets at the moment, but lots of plans for membership and a bunch of other things that could also work. And very happy to talk.
I mean, my view, and this will seem a little crass, but I hope you'll understand it in context, is you put a price tag in an event like this on everything but your integrity. Like, there's no reason not to sell sponsorship of the smallest increment thing on your program. And like, just don't do it in a way that is as a conflict with your journalism, in the same way that you wouldn't allow for advertising or sponsorship in your publication that is in conflict with your journalism. But, you know, don't be so precious and fragile about taking money. Hell yes, take the money. Take the money the right way. There's never the wrong time to do the right thing. Like, this is the right thing. Just do it the right way, and there's money available to you.
One more question?
Hi, thank you. Jonathan Hayward from Public Interest News Foundation in the UK. Great event about events. Do you ever, so we've touched on news avoiders and those kind of hard to reach audiences, and I'm guessing they're not even going to come to Free Congress. I mean, there are people who are just going to go to a football game or a hockey game or a bar or a nail salon or a barber shop. And if you really want to speak to those people, do you not want to go to those places and go and visit them, as it were, in their home, rather than expecting them to come into your kind of like pretty elite kind of space on Main Street?
I'll let you take that first.
You know, again, why do I have to choose? Why can't we do this event and also go to the football game? Like, you know, the Tribune's philosophy from the very beginning has been more like a tech company than anything else. Push, not pull. Go to them. Don't wait for them to come to you. The Tribune Festival is part of a statewide event strategy that is 50 events around the state of Texas a year, on average about one a week, from small towns to big cities. So we do a lot of that, going to people where they live. Don't expect and would not imagine that they would come to us just for this one event. You know, there are 30 million people in the state of Texas. We have among the worst voter turnout of the 50 states. We have an enormous amount of work to do to give people civic engagement and civic empowerment through the news that we produce. This is one of many ways that we try to do it. And as I said earlier, it's a marathon. It's going to take a long time to get everybody in. We recognize that with certain audiences, we have more challenges than others.
Yeah, for us, it's slightly different partially because it's, you know, it's a much younger event. But part of the answer is in the curation of the speakers and in making sure that you bring in the speakers that people, that you don't necessarily want to see, but others do. So I think you need to be really attuned to your to your audience in order to know, like, who it is that they would come for, and then there's a whole array of other things for them to choose from. And part of it, I mean, it's funny you mentioned football. Georgia's going to be playing Portugal, I think, in Turkey on like second day of the event, and we're having this discussion. And you know, I'm gonna lose the battle. We're gonna have to give the main stage to the football game and turn it into because otherwise people will leave. So we're just putting football into it.
But by the way, when you're talking about football and I'm talking about football, we're not talking about the same thing.
Jonathan is from the UK.
Just saying.
So me and him are talking about this.
It just occurred to me within that, we're talking about two different things.
I also just want to thank these panelists for a great conversation today and do a free plug. I think you should attend the Zeg Fest in Tbilisi, Georgia. It is June 21st to the 23rd. Texas Tribune Festival's dates are not out because the University of Texas football team
has
not announced its schedule.
I do, September 5th to 7th.
This is a scoop.
Yes.
September the 5th. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It ends with football.
It always ends with football.
Comes full circle to football.